Call the meeting to order. This morning, I'll take a roll call. Mayor Pro Tem, are you here? Here. Councilmember Rivenbark, you here? Councilmember Spears, are you here?
I'm here.
Councilmember Waddell, you here? Councilmember Andrews, are you here?
Yes, here.
Councilmember Joyner, are you here? Councilmember Joyner? Okay, and the chair is here. First item of business is approval of the minutes. C2 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year master license agreement with Dell Financial Services, LLC of Round Rock, Texas, for an annual cost not to exceed $150,000. C3 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 1-year agreement with Smartsheet Incorporated of Bellevue, Washington for $90,960. C4 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with True Love Fabrications Incorporated of Wilmington, North Carolina in the amount of $168,632 for the design and construction of animal habitats at Halliburton Parks Nature Center.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
would it be possible to have some kind of a pretty picture or?
Yeah, yes, sir. We'll be glad to do that. You want it now? Andy, are you prepared?
Yeah, good morning, Mayor and Council. So glad to answer any questions you have about the habitats. So currently, the cost of these habitats is driven by their custom design in nature. So this is a very niche market for designing animal ambassador habitats for zoos and aquariums. The current habitats at the Nature Center are retrofitted, built by volunteers. They're not intentional, somewhat of an afterthought. So the design with True Love Fabrications, so again, it's custom design in nature. So a lot of these habitats, 3 of those will be built into the Nature Center itself. So it feels very intentional. You can see here by the current design, you know, our current habitats are meeting some of the basic requirements for the animals. As far as their life support goes, we have to incorporate into them UV, temperature controls, lighting, temperature control systems, humidity control. This is a representation of the new habitats. So overall as a whole, these will enhance the quality of care for the animals. We want to raise our standards of animal husbandry to the highest possible standards. We are taking care of these animals for their lifetime, for their duration. It'll certainly enhance the visitor's experience as well. And then certainly, again, you can see here the custom design for the animals and the space. I would like to note that each of these animals have, depending on the species, have very specific requirements as far as the amount of space they have. Again, the life support systems will be built in so that viewers coming to the visitor center won't be able to see that. So that presents some challenges with the design. True Love Fabrications has a very impressive portfolio, working with the North Carolina Aquarium at Fort Fisher, Roanoke Island, zoos and aquariums across the United States. We're very fortunate to have this vendor here in our backyard. And here's some of the work that he's done. These are specifically at the Fort Fisher Aquarium. As you can see by these photos, this is certainly going to enhance the visitor's experience. It'll feel very intentional when visitors come into the Nature Center. And again, they are unique in their design.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Okay. C5 is a resolution eliminating City Policy 305 safety shoe and implementing an internal procedure for providing eligible employees with safety shoes. And C6 is a resolution authorizing the lease of real property located at 929 North Front Street to Proto Case USA Incorporated. Public hearings, PH1 is an ordinance amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 18, for various amendments related to legacy district standards and exceptional design. This was continued from our June 18th, 2024 meeting. And then PH2 is an ordinance directing the housing inspector to vacate, close, and repair or demolish the dwelling at 1209 South 7th Street as unfit for human habitation pursuant to Article 5, Chapter 16 of the City Code, and directing that a notice be placed thereon prohibiting its use or occupancy. Resolutions, R1 is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a 5-year agreement with Axon Enterprises Incorporated of Scottsdale, Arizona for in-car cameras and access to the Fusus Enterprise Systems for the Wilmington Police Department. And then R2 is a resolution authorizing the award of a construction contract in the amount of $1,160,076 to Hart Builders Incorporated for the Riverwalk North Marina Repair Project. And R3 is a resolution declaring multiple city-owned properties surplus and available for sale. And then R4 is a resolution authorizing the lease of real property at 115 North 3rd Street and 114 North 2nd Street. And then, of course, reports. We have reports of the council's appointments committees for boards and commissions and committees that will also be presented tomorrow night. This concludes this portion of our meeting. Mr. Manager, do you have anything further more you want to share with us?
Yes, sir, we do. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Chad McEwen has an update that he is going to do on the Skyline Center. I believe Aubrey Parsley is going to lead off that presentation. We have a number of folks here in the audience who are here to provide support and answers to questions that you may have. This will probably be one of our more detailed reports just to be able to catch you up to speed on everything.
Good morning, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. It's been just over a year since we closed on the Skyline Center, and there's been a number of conversations that have sprung up over the last few months on really requests for progress on the various items related to Skyline Center. So staff has recognized the need to do a little better job in reviewing these items, so we want to cover a lot of territory this morning with you, as the manager mentioned. We called this presentation a year in review and looking ahead because we're going to do just that. We'll cover 4 topics, and for each we will look at what's happened over the last year, where we are today, and then where we are going. And Dylan, I can't seem to change slides. Thank you. So, as the city manager mentioned, this one will be a duet. Chad McEwen and I will cover this. The last slide will be Mr. McEwen's, and the first 3 bullets here will be mine. But before we get started, I did want to call out some folks that are in the room that have been very deeply involved in this transformational project for the city. First, our 2 city employees, Marion Doherty and Daryl McCall. These 2 are running the building operations, front of house and back of house. These were jobs that we had no employee handbook for, and these 2 have really hit the ground running with these roles. They're the folks that take our hopefully good ideas and turn them into results. Also joining us in the room is LS3P. The city procured their services to help plan our use of the building. We have Bob Presley, project manager, and Emily Patterson, an interior designer for LS3P, in the room with us. We also have a few folks from Monteith, Drew Rentelman from the operations team and Evan Herman from the pre-construction team are here as well. They were deeply tied into some of the material that Mr. McEwen will present here later. But back to the agenda, these 4 areas of focus are going to be what we cover. Again, we'll look at where we were a year ago, what we've accomplished, where we are now, and then looking ahead a bit. Although we'll talk about these items one at a time, I did want to just take a moment to draw your attention to the fact that each of these bullets has been worked in parallel over the last year, and the complexity of that is that when we would make a plan, come up with some actions for one of these items, there was always some trade-offs associated with how we were going to, let's say, move people in and lease space. So they were very much interconnected, and while we'll present on them one at a time, I did want to draw your attention to that fact. So this is taking us back in history a bit. This slide we first ran in January of 2023 when we first unveiled the Skyline Center project. I wanted to put it up as a reminder so that we can just recall how scattered we were, not only by location, but by function as well. This visual really drives that home for everybody, I hope. And now you look at what we've done over the last year. Since July of 2023, there's obviously been significant change and progress at Skyline Center. All of these moves that you see highlighted on the slide have happened, and they've happened at virtually no cost. And a lot of our folks did things like move their own belongings. We did have some move-in expenses, but things like furniture setup expenses. But by and large, these moves up here on the slide happened at very little cost. As you can see here on the slide, July 2023, I was the first one in the building after the sale closed, and I remember that very first morning pulling into the parking garage, only to see IT pulling in right behind me in a minivan with the trunk just full of network switches, ready to get into that network room and set things up. So we really did our best to hit the ground running from that very first month of July. And things progressed methodically from there to a plan that Mr. McEwen and the city manager's office set up. We had 3 objectives associated with that plan. Of course, we wanted continuity of operations. There could be no service deterioration to our citizens. We wanted to make most of the move-ins at minimal cost, do as much as we possibly could without creating any additional costs of substance. And then the third was that we had to intertwine these 2 things with the Thermo Fisher transition. They had an operation that was in that building, scattered all across the building, that they had to unwind. And one of the things that doesn't get mentioned much is there was an entire transition agreement as an appendix to our purchase and sale that we had to work with them and work around in order to move these folks in. So that really closed out in November of 2023, which then unlocked the ability to move the folks that you see here in December 2023 in Housing and Neighborhood, and then in the spring of this year with those functions listed there under the March and April 2024. It was quite a process, and you can see it played out over time. A couple of numbers that I'd like to put out there to quantify the breadth and the scope of the move-in is we had over 300 employees that were moved over the last year, and we've activated over 200,000 square feet of space that's used by the city and used by the public. That, of course, includes conference rooms and a number of other functions that are within the building. For context, that's just about 2 convention center spaces in one. There's no doubt, though, still work to do. We're certainly not done yet. The fact of the matter is there are just some functions that we cannot shoehorn into the building, and council chambers is one of them. The space layout, the functionality of the space for this type of meeting, the technology just isn't compatible. So we know we need to do work there to have it function appropriately for these types of meetings and for council chambers and other public meetings as well. We also do not have a dedicated customer service center, which is to say a place within the facility to direct the public, one-stop shopping to conduct business with the city. And then we have the 3rd floor that needs some upfits as well to provide some specialized functionality for the city clerk, the police department, emergency management, the fire marshal, and traffic management, all of which, again, require just some specialized functionality in the space to really make it work for them. Plus, we're also preparing some areas on the 3rd floor to address future city growth as staff grows over time. This will be the city's office residence well into the future, so we did want to prep some of the space and find those synergies there to allow for that future growth. Let me stop that discussion here, as Mr. McEwen will be going into much more detail on this item here in a little bit. So moving on to surplus property, this item here was obviously a good bit more forward-facing in that whenever we sell a piece of property, we do have an item come before council I just wanted to put 3 examples up on the slide here, surplus property, just as a refresher. But at a macro level, in total, we've sold over $3 million worth of surplus property. All those sale proceeds have gone toward paying down the debt from Skyline Center. One item I did want to draw your attention to, as it did not involve a council action, was closing the health clinic. Within 3 months of closing on the Skyline Center, we were able to successfully negotiate an early lease termination, move that health clinic into the building as early as October 2023, and saved about 4 months' rent in the process of doing so. We set up the, let me see here, excuse me. So this also bears mentioning 302 Willard and 1502 Wellington, as you see here on the slide. These transitions took place very quickly. I mean, we had folks in those buildings as recently as October 2023, and we were able to close on sales just 5 months later in the case of Willard and about 8 months later in the case of Wellington. Another thing that we wanted to cover with you all here, as it hasn't gotten much conversation, it was a brief topic of conversation in the budget process, was we knew that the Skyline Center was going to offer the city a good bit in the way of strategic flexibility in terms of facility management well into the future. And one thing that it allowed us to do here very recently over the last year was it allowed us to close the Southeast Command Center. That space was functionally obsolete. It was no longer a facility that was serving the police folks that were there as needed, and the police staff, along with engineering, had been working on a CIP submission that was in the early stages of estimates, coming in at about $28 million. The Chief Williams, City Manager's Office, Captain Dawson, who I believe is in the room as well, all got together, put our heads together, and figured out how we could eliminate this request coming forward by utilizing the Skyline Center first, a small lease up on 421, as well as repurposing some other city surplus property to take that $28 million request and turn it into an eliminated request by completing and finding that functionality in Skyline Center and other areas in the city as well. So that was a big win for us over the last year. No doubt there's still quite a bit of work to do on surplus property. We very much recognize that and thank council for approving having on-call brokerage services here. That's going to add an awful lot of horsepower to our efforts. We have 5 priorities up here on the slide for the sale of surplus property, along with a couple bullets about each. In the interest of time, I won't go over each of these, but I do want to point out that these parcels that are left to sell, they're bigger, they're more complex, they're more valuable, and they just take more in the way of precursor activities to get them ready for market. So these bullets up here on the slide are meant to highlight that while you haven't seen any items on your agenda to sell these properties, staff has been busy with various activities to get these properties ready for sale so that they resale at the highest value possible. So last area of discussion for me will be market rate leases at Skyline Center. This slide right here is another original slide from our original deck. We always knew that the Skyline Center was going to contemplate market rent space available for lease in the building. We knew we weren't going to be using all the space, but exactly how we were going to implement leasing that space was a bit of a question mark early on, but the concept was there from the very beginning. So allow me to just go over how things have been progressing on the lease front over the last 11 months. To put it plainly, things have been going very well on the leasing front. We've had 35 prospective tenants come through the building and tour. We've had 8 new leases with the additional lease to Thermo Fisher adding up to 9. So that's a very high conversion rate from those prospects to active leases. And today, if you were to take the annualized amount for our annual leases, we have just over actually $2.4 million in lease revenues, which, to put in context for the total operating costs of the building, represents about 2/3 of that total operating cost. So no doubt, though, there is still work to do on the leasing front. We have 3 leases that are expiring within a year, but they make up less than about 200,000 of that 2.4 million you saw on the previous slide, and we're confident in renewing one of those leases. The other 2 are short-term leases. We still have a good amount of space available in the building, so there's plenty of more opportunity to continue the successful track we're having. And what's more is we have 4 active negotiations underway, and just to give you an idea of what's coming down the deal pipeline, hopefully, is if we were to successfully negotiate all 4 of these and convert them from letters of interest to leases today, we'd be putting another 31,000 square feet of space under lease, an additional $750,000 in lease revenue, which would bring the total over $3 million, getting us to about 80 to 85% of our OpEx, which obviously is something we're very much hoping to do here in the short term. And honestly, making a strong case once we get to about that point for the building to start looking a lot like and financially an enterprise fund, which would be certainly a step in the right direction. So a lot of work continues on the leasing front. A couple things, or a few things, I also wanted to mention as it relates to leasing. You know, we always said in the beginning that we wanted to achieve market rate rental rates, and we are certainly doing that and then some. The average rent rate downtown is $25.50 a square foot. We are closer to $30 a square foot in the building, which is certainly a win, and just demonstrates how unique and valuable of an asset the building is downtown. Don't forget, too, that these leases put revenue into the parking fund. These leases come with folks who take down space, parking spots in the deck, so it is a virtuous cycle in that sense, that when we bring leases on, we're putting parkers in the deck to also pay into the parking enterprise fund. And then last but not least, the leases have acted as an economic development tool, and you'll see that there's an item on your agenda tonight for a company called Protocase is a prime example of that. They're a Canadian manufacturer that is going to be setting up their United States headquarters here in the Skyline Center in Wilmington, and they're taking down 3,200 square feet of space to do that and bringing all those new jobs into the area as well. And we have additional prospects that are looking to do the same thing. So it is an economic development tool of substance for us, and certainly something we hope to continue to build on into the future. So that wraps up my portion of the presentation. Happy to take any questions on these 3 slides, or if you all would prefer to, or these 3 bullets, if you all prefer to hold your questions to after Mr. McEwen's piece, that's fine as well. Thank you.
Good morning. Aubrey did an excellent job overviewing the year-to-date, 1 year out from the purchase, of the lease status for the building, status of surplus sales, as well as move-in. My portion of the presentation and my portion of the overall project has mainly involved project management of the remaining areas that the city will occupy that weren't move-in ready. We've typically referred to those as the Skyline upfit areas. A little project history related to those upfits. In fall of 2023, the city hired LS3P Associates to handle schematic design, construction design, bid services, and construction management services. Soon into that process, we started looking at our means of delivery for the construction of that project and realized that our best option was CM at risk. Put that project out, received numerous bids, and the best bid or best proposal we received was from Monteith Construction, a local company. We hired them in March of 2024, primarily for the purposes of design consulting, cost efficiency evaluation, as well as cost estimation. The Skyline Upfit project involves 4 major components. When I say components, I'm typically referring to certain areas of the building. Probably the most intensive area that we're going to be involved in is the first floor. The first floor includes the council chambers, conference area, as well as a family restroom that's required as part of an ADA upgrade. The second floor also has a little bit of improvements related to ADA, fire and life safety, as well as a demised wall for the IT office that's required in terms of confidentiality. First floor, I skipped over that. First floor also involves a customer service center that Aubrey mentioned briefly that will house CFPUA, Safe Light, cashier's office, but most importantly, planning and community development as well. The third floor will involve suites, designated spaces for the city clerk's office, the fire marshal, the police department admin, as well as the Sting Center, and eventually the traffic services center proposed in 2028, emergency management, and as Aubrey mentioned, substantial amount of area for future growth for city departments. The fourth category is somewhat of a catch-all that involves general improvements throughout the building, mainly involved in the area of access control and doorways. This comes operationally involves the elevator bays, making sure those elevator bays is another line of defense for folks accessing floors other than the first floor, making sure all floors have doorways there at the elevator bays. We're also doing an analysis of the generator for the building. There's currently 2 generators on the property, and they sit in parallel. A few weeks ago, commercial power went out. The generator kicked on. There was essentially no usage of that second generator. So the second generator exists only to back up the first generator for redundancy purposes. We're looking at an analysis that will help us determine whether or not we can use some of that secondary generator power for other areas of the building, primarily the first floor or more sensitive areas of the building that would need operationally to rely on backup power. And then as mentioned earlier, there are some required ADA upgrades that we're taking care of as part of this upfit. First floor points of access. This is operational now in terms of our points of access. The primary public entry point for the building is going to continue to be that central southern side of the building where you walk in, the coffee shop's on the right, planning and community development is straight ahead. In terms of tenants and staff, the front entrance will continue to be the primary point of access. That's not to say that tenants or staff can't use that primary point of access or any of the doorways along the east side of the cafeteria area, but it's designed for those 2 areas to be accessible for both staff as well as the public entering the building. The public can come to that front eastern entrance, the main entrance, and they'll be instructed to go down the hallway and go to the customer service center if that's where their business is. You can see the 2 areas here listed that primarily involve the upfits, the council chambers and conference area, as well as the customer service center. And I'll have another slide in just a minute that goes in more detail about those 2 areas. A little more detail here. I'll call attention to the council chambers area, and we're generally referring to it as council chambers, but we've had a lot of input about this space from other committees, from staff that involve, that do committee support, board support that will use this space. This will be used by Historic Preservation, Board of Adjustments, Planning Commission, DAC. A lot of different committees meetings will be held in this space as well, obviously as city council meetings. Currently those rooms, there's 8 rooms there now. They're divisible by movable walls. When this upfit is complete, council chambers will have a hard wall from the floor to the deck all the way up, separating council chambers from those 4 remaining rooms. A lot of reasons for that, primarily for privacy. If you're in there now, obviously with those walls, those movable walls, there's not a lot of sound barrier. We've had meetings in there and have noticed that, and it would be a real challenge during meeting time if there was something going on in one of those other rooms. So the decision's been made to go all the way to the roof deck with a solid wall to separate that space out from those other 4 rooms. Another item to point out here, currently that area has a wall separating what would be council chambers from that back hallway along the west side. This plan shows that wall being removed, and you'll see in a later slide that exposes those floor-to-ceiling windows that exist that open up the room to river views. Off the northern portion of the council chambers, you'll see a conference room. last time we discussed this, we talked about the ability to access the dais from that room. We've worked with LS3P to, as well as Monteith, to find a solution to that. You'll also be able to access the dais or off the dais to that back northern hall. One of the challenges here was to provide safety and security to the back of that dais during meetings, but also be able to allow the public to access the public restrooms there on the northern portion of that hallway. We work closely with Captain Irvin and Chief Williams and his staff to make sure that, you'll see in a next slide, that proper safety egress was provided in that area, but it was also available to access the public areas of the northern part of that hallway. In the center of this slide, you can see the actual floor plan layout of the customer service center, symbolic by that generally large open area there, waiting room area that has those counters surrounding it on the north and east side, as well as breakout conference rooms there on the left.
Chad, do you have a pointer? Is there a laser pointer you can use?
Do you have? Mouse pad, Dylan? Here we go. Okay. So, Councilman Robert, what I was mentioning just then was this large conference, or this large waiting room right here in the center.
I understand it.
Okay. This is an interior view. You're looking north. That will be the planning community development counter. To the right, to the east, would be the cashier, CFPUA, and SafeLight area. And then those conference rooms I mentioned are shown there on the left. Again, referencing the safety and security of the area, we worked closely with Chief Williams, Captain Irvin, and their staff to come up with a plan that not only ensures security, but also is a convenient means of egress for events for the public into these areas. And you can see here where the screening area, the primary point of entry, screening area will be located right here in this area, and the public will head south down that southern hallway to access the council chambers. One thing I didn't mention earlier, and you'll be able to see it in another slide, is what the plan is for that roof, the ceiling in that room. If you look at that room now from north to south direction, when you open those two rooms up, or those four rooms up, actually, its height to depth ratio is very skewed. It's a long room with a lower ceiling, and we were concerned about that, how that would lay out, particularly when you have a large meeting, people are sitting at the back, you've got TVs that are going to drop down that the public will need to see. We were worried about the visual conflict between the dais, which is going to be elevated, the public at the back of the room, and making sure there was proper attention provided to the visual aspects of the room. And you can see there along the left side, those windows that are existing, that wall is removed, giving the room more width, but also a better view and natural light coming in. The height difference and adjustment is kind of shown here. It's also shown in the 3D rendering that LS3P has done. The room is existing about 17 foot in height. When we take the ceiling out and slope it back along those butterfly trusses that run north to south, the room will be up to 28 feet on the southern end of the building, giving a lot more height to the depth of that room. Second floor, some very minor modifications here. Again, mentioning the space for IT. Because of security requirements related to the business they conduct for the city, this wall is needing to be added to provide IT with a secure point of entry and access to their area. Simultaneously, what that's going to require is us to knock out this hall, or create this hallway right here so folks can access, from a life safety standpoint, the stairwell. Other points to bring up here is there's two large storage rooms for archive storage there in the center portion of that floor. not a lot on the second floor to speak of. Third floor is pretty extensive in terms of upfits. This floor will include the city clerk's office, police admin, Sting Center, the fire marshal's office, the emergency management staff, as well as a future home for traffic engineer or traffic services there on the southeast corner of the building. The blue areas are future city growth. Those are areas that we have no purpose for right now, but we're designating and will demise for future city growth in the event that we need them. Cost estimation. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we are at 50% construction drawings and working with Monteith and LS3P. That number is around $6.3 million. You have a handout that itemizes that expense out. Keep in mind, this is not our guaranteed maximum price. We do anticipate, as we finalize moving from 50% to 100% CDs, that GMP will move. Could move up, could move down. We're going to do our best to control that and make sure it stays as close as possible to 6.3, or as we go through the finer details, possibly bring it down. That number assumes that this project will be conducted in a single phase. We've had these discussions all along with Monteith and LS3P, and we've asked them to provide us some sort of guidance on what the opportunity cost is if we don't do one phase. And roughly, they're saying about a 10% cost add for demode, remode, potential escalation, materials, which is, I think, from what they're saying, an industry standard if you phase larger projects like this. Draw attention to our cost and scope evolution over time. When we first provided you with a very rough estimate on this project, it was over $9 million. And I think what we've seen in terms of a $6.3 million project, although that is still a significant amount of money, is that the CMR process and working with Monteith and LS3P has worked to date, that we've been able to recognize efficiencies, recognize cost measures that we can avoid. We've worked with staff on areas that their original ask, we've asked them to reconsider from the purposes of controlling costs, and they've been very receptive to those requests. This chart down at the bottom does show you the breakdown of construction costs, design fees, as well as the furnitures, fixture, and equipment allowance that is provided for the project. If the project were to be phased, from a convenience standpoint and an overall desire to limit disruption, this is how we would recommend a phasing plan in any one of these components. And phase 1 and phase 2 are interchangeable in terms of which projects you list. That would, you can see there that total comes up to that 5.45 construction total that's listed on the prior slide. Next steps, we're going to continue to work with LS3P and Monteith to work towards a 100% CD number, guaranteed maximum price standpoint. We're going to continue to work diligently, as Aubrey mentioned, on selling surplus properties that we've identified, and also potentially any opportunities for other means of funding this project if the council so desires. Estimated timeline, I know that this question will come up potentially once we do decide to move forward with the project, once council does give us the blessing to move forward. We're looking at about a 3-month timeline for the bid award, contract execution, notice to proceed, and mobilization for the contractor. And then construction timeline, we're looking at a 6 to 9 month lead time, putting us with an estimated occupancy date of somewhere between July and September of next year. With that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Mr. Waddell.
You're a mind reader. How'd you know that was coming?
I don't know, I just saw you on the side of my eye.
Thank you. This is a great presentation. I do have a couple of quick questions, just for clarification. The there was some mention of access control doors outside of all the elevators. Is that every floor?
Yes, sir. I believe that does include all the city floors or all lease floors as well. All city floors, I'm sorry, all city floors. So that'll be the first floor, the second floor, third floor, 10, 11, and 12.
So we have, right now, we have the badge functioning as access control, and anybody who's a tenant has access controls based on that badge. Is this also just a secondary measure of security? If somebody was to get off on the same floor, they didn't badge in, but, they got on with somebody that had badged in? Is that
Correct.
kind of the idea?
Right now, if you walk in the front lobby where Beth sits, you either go to see Beth and someone comes and gets you, or you have a badge and you go through those glass doors. You swipe in there. You swipe into an elevator. This is a third layer, like you mentioned, a third layer of protection to keep the potential of someone riding up and then just going onto the floor. The fifth and sixth floors already have this now as part of the upfits that Thermo Fisher did.
Okay, that's helpful. And then can you go back to the phased approach? So the construction total for that comes to the same number as I think the previous slide that had the construction total. So where's the 10%? When they're at 10%, approximation for additional construction?
If we phased it, you would need to add 10%
Oh, I see it now.
to any of those subtotals there in
Okay.
phase 1 or phase 2.
Okay. And lastly, I want to commend you guys for getting the consolidation done in such a timely manner, while also being cognizant of the costs, and that was really great to see that, and wonderful to see it put together in this presentation. I know it wasn't easy, and so just to all the staff who kind of bootstrapped this thing, good work. The lease-up success, nearing the OpEx cost in basically under a year is probably the best news I've seen in a long time. So thank you for the hard work on that. I know we're still not there, but these are promises that we all made to the taxpayer, and we're making good on them. That's good government, and I'm excited to see that happen. I want to thank you for the detailed work that we just did in the design, and to our partners, Monteith and LS3P, who've put this together. It's going to be very helpful to go ahead and move forward when we're all ready to move forward with this, and it will be great to get us moved in there. I'm still just a little hesitant to. This is probably for council and just a little bit of y'all's edification. I'm hesitant to move forward until we are able to transact on some of these larger parcels that I know we're working on. I know we need to get in there. I look forward to getting in there. I look forward to having council over in that building finally with the rest of staff and all the necessary improvements that we need, that you guys have detailed out. But I will still be hesitant until we're able to transact on some of that larger property, because that's really the last missing piece in the promises that we made to the taxpayer, and I want to make good on those, as I'm sure everybody else does. So just some comments. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Andrews.
So Chad, could you go back to the schematic of the council chambers?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so did I imagine it, or did the dais used to be turned a different way?
It did. It was originally proposed with the back of the dais along that western wall. And there was a lot of discussion about it. We still had that height to depth ratio issue of that 17 foot. It was still problematic from a standpoint of communications and IT in terms of the drop-down TVs, the height of the dais. And the decision was made, I believe we discussed it at the March budget meeting, about turning it and reorienting it north to south as opposed to east to west.
So, okay, and I see it says capacity is 216 seats. I guess in the earlier iteration, I had imagined that we could open up those rooms if we ever had more overflow. I guess it's still possible to put monitors in there.
That's the plan, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We went around with that, but again, the challenge with that petition wall is the sound. If there's something going on, you'd have backfeeding with the TVs. That hard wall going all the way to the roof deck would certainly help buffer that sound.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, good work.
Thank you.
Good report. Mr. Caudle?
That's all we have for you this morning, Mr. Mayor.
That's all, folks. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that, we stand adjourned.